While I finish the base plates, I let the bobbins and the coils cool down after solder and tape up. Then I take the initial DC resistance ratings just to make sure that they're in spec and note those on the build sheet. Make sure everything's soldered well, all that fun stuff. Okay, it's assembly time of the bridge position. But first I'll give you guys an overview of the materials I chose for my vintage wines. It's a standard butyrate bobbin. These are cream colored, and the set will be covered with a nickel plated cover. I use a maple spacer. I like the maple because they crush a little bit when you tighten down the slug bobbin, which makes up for any inconsistencies in the finish of the cast magnets. You know, it's tough to keep a really tight tolerance on something that's not machined on the thickness. And not sure if it was by design originally, but the wood ones, or the wood spacers, do tend to work a little bit better. For keeper bars, I use a machined piece of steel. They're not stamped from flat stock. They are 100% machined. I get excellent tonal qualities out of these, opposed to the more porous type stamp pieces. And then my base plates are, nickel silver. The holes for the thread, or for the pole pieces, are threaded also. This allows for a more, I wouldn't say elegant structure, but definitely more stable. As they thread through and promote a better ground to the pole piece screws, and they work out pretty well. So we'll move on and we'll start assembly. I've already pressed the slugs into the slug bobbin, and prior to pressing these in, mine are just a touch larger than most of the normal sizes that are out there, and it also requires me to hone the holes out just a touch. Not only for the size, but I shoot for a certain degree of press, so I'm not stressing on the inner wall of the bobbin or expanding it to alter any of the tension that I've applied on the coil. Naturally, you're going to have the most tension around the outer edge of the coil, and if you press something in here hard enough, you're going to expand it. You can break some of the coil wire, or even crack a bobbin, possibly. I take the extra step to make sure those are correct. For assembly, the first thing I do is I take the screw bobbin, and I'm going to thread 2 holes in it for the pole screws to aid in an easier assembly process. I prefer to cut the threads opposed to just running screws through with a drill. And this will also help me line up the bobbin on the base plate to index the magnet and make sure everything's aligned correctly. So we'll run a couple pole piece screws in to get this started. I'll take the keeper bar and we'll set this on here and make sure everything's lined up well. We're dealing with 2 different production tolerances in the keeper and the bobbin and the holes I tapped in. So we want to make sure that it's straight, or the holes line up decent. I don't have to oblong them or anything to get everything to go together smooth. So set the screw bobbin on the base plate. I'll bring the magnet in, the north side towards the slugs. And the screws to mount it. The The reason I do it this way is just so everything comes in and at a nice alignment. The magnet is touching both the keeper and the slugs. Before I pull the screw bobbin off to do the wiring. And in this stage I can slide things around a little bit before I lock anything down and make sure I have a decent, not too much of a gap depending on the how good the magnet is cast. And if it's real off, I'll scrap the magnet and swap it out and put another one in. We'll slide the spacer in. And we'll just snug up the screw or the slug coil. Just to keep it in place. Now I can pull the screw side off and grab the start of the slug, which is going to be the hot. I'll trim a little bit of that off. And strip it so I can attach it to the conductor. Braided wiring, pretty standard for all the vintage stuff. It's real nice quality, has a nice thick lead on it. The inside is the vintage cloth pushback type wire. So we'll push some of the braid back on that, give it a twist so the cotton pushes back a little bit nicer. And we'll pull some of this out so we can solder it up. The reason I wire them, or solder everything off of the pickup like this, is I tuck everything in the channel next to the keeper bar. I don't tuck the wires in the middle, between the two bobbins. And the reason I do that really is just to add a little bit of protection to the joints. If it's an uncovered pickup and somebody has real sweaty hands or spilling beer on their guitar, it's just going to be a little safer. I'll feel that, make sure there's no real burrs on it. And we'll pull the pushback back over the joint as far as it'll go. And then cover the joint in paper tape. That's covered. Pull the braid back down to just before the solder joint, and then I'll pinch it back a little bit. Not that it should pose any problems in the future, it's just something I do. I'll press it up against the wall of the base plate here and grab a pair of locking tweezers. Lock that in place. And then solder the braid to the wall of the base plate, and that'll ground the base plate and anything else that's touching it. Bring the lead wire through the hole of the base plate, and it's soldered in place now, where it should stay for quite some time. I usually put enough solder on it so somebody's not going to pull the actual braid out of here. I think when I tested it, it was like 80 pounds or 90 pounds or something like that. Alright, so the hot lead is ready to go. Now we can take the screw coil, set that in place. We'll flip it over and run a couple brass screws in there to hold it, snug it up. snug those up for a moment. And back the pull screws out just a touch. So when I tighten it down, the keeper comes in good contact with the base plate. And as I tighten these down, I'm feeling with the back of my index finger here, in case the screw coil wants to kick over on an angle at all due to the magnet being a little thicker. As long as it stays straight, the cover is going to install a lot easier. It's not going to be on an angle, pitched, or anything like that. And I want to make sure that I don't have an excessive gap between the bobbins. So once you tighten them down, I mean, it can cause problems if it starts to spread, if the magnet's too tall or anything like that. This one is good. We're ready for the rest of the wiring. Next step I do is the ground, which is the start of the screw coil, and that's going to be soldered to the base plate. So we'll trim that to length. Strip a little off that. We'll tin that. This will be easier. A little solder on the base plate where it's going to go. And when that's in place, use my little rod here, show off my fancy left-hand soldering capability, which is actually pretty awkward. And the only thing remaining is the link of the finish sides of the coils. Trim those to length. Now, to protect this from any problems, I like to fold the joint back just a little bit so the insulation provides a tip, or it covers the very top of it. I'll take a little piece of paper tape and attach it vertically, pinch it together, then take another piece and seal it up. And now that gets tucked in underneath the screw bobbin. And it'll be held in place with the standard piece of tape that wraps around the edges to protect it. So that's all the wiring. Now we'll do the pull piece installation and switch camera angles.